I want to kick off by explaining what the debate is about and also how the debate is going to work. The motion for the debate, as I'm sure you all know and you can see here, is as follows. This House believes that it is morally wrong for groups to approach women and display abortion imagery outside facilities which provide abortion services. So this is a pretty profound debate. Immediately, it's about the rightness or wrongness of the increasingly common protests we see outside abortion facilities in many parts of the world. But it also touches on some very big questions. It touches on questions about rights, about liberty, about the freedom to protest, about the freedom to access medical services without being hindered, about privacy, and fundamentally about when one person's rights interfere with another person's rights. So there's a lot in this debate. Morally, politically, there is a lot in this discussion. And the way the debate will work is that we will open with our two speakers, who I'll introduce in a minute, and one of whom will speak for the motion, one of whom will speak against the motion. They will have about 20 minutes each, and then we will have a brief to and fro up here on the panel where I will put Ann's points to Gregg and Gregg's points to Ann. And then we're going to throw it open to you, the audience. We are very keen to hear what you think. But I would ask everyone to please keep your questions and comments when we come to you as brief as possible so that we can squeeze in as many people as possible. So on to our speakers. We have two very esteemed speakers, and I can think of no one better to have this tussle about the question of displaying abortion imagery than these two speakers. We'll begin with Ann Furedi. Ann is going to be speaking for the motion. Ann is the CEO of the not-for-profit charity BPAS, the British Pregnancy Advisory Service, which is Britain's main abortion service. It provides care for more than 60,000 women a year. Ann has written and argued extensively in defense of women's autonomy and reproductive rights. She is currently the chairwoman of Voices for Choice, a coalition of pro-choice organisations in Britain. She's also a former Sunday school teacher, and she is a wife, a mother, and a college governor. And then speaking against the motion, we have Gregg Cunningham. Gregg is many things. He is a decorated veteran of the Vietnam War, a former two-term member of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, and a retired U.S. Air Force Reserve colonel. During his time in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, he introduced legislation which ended public funding for abortion. And he was also a prime sponsor of the Abortion Control Act. He is currently Executive Director of the Center for Bioethical Reform, which is a pro-life advocacy group whose supporters display graphic images of aborted fetuses. So those are our speakers, and that is how the debate is going to work. But before we start, there is one very important thing we have to do, which we're going to do now, and we're also going to do it at the end of the debate, which is to take a vote amongst the audience. So I want you to look at this motion, think about it, and we are going to take a vote now on who is for it, who is against it, and who is as yet undecided. I'm just going to tell you the results of the first vote. 15 people are currently for the motion, 81 are against it, and 24 are undecided. So we will do another vote at the end and see if things change. So our first speaker is Ann Furedi.
Thank you, Brendan, and thank you very much for inviting me along to this discussion. I've clearly got a fairly serious job on my hands from looking at that first show of hands. What I really want to do to begin with is to explain the situation as I see it at the moment, which really is why I think we've come to the position of having this debate here tonight. Protests have been taking... Sorry. Can you hear me now? Okay. Protests have been taking place at BPAS clinics for way longer than I've been the chief executive at BPAS, and I've been running the organisation for 10 years. And it's been very common for us to have protesters outside the clinics, particularly clinics in areas where there are large Catholic constituencies. But the nature of the protests has really changed in the last couple of years. When I started, the protests would tend to be some people praying perhaps outside the clinics, or they would be town centre protests with people discussing with passers-by why they thought that abortion was wrong. They were protests that were designed to draw people's attention to the fact that there was an abortion clinic in the vicinity. Now the nature of the protests has changed. They're no longer protests that are concerned with engaging with passers-by or highlighting the fact that that particular building is an abortion clinic. The nature of the protests now is such that they are about stopping our clients, our patients, from coming in to the clinics, to talk to the clients, to show them literature, to show them photographs, to do what I think many of you would describe as being pavement counselling, what in the United States is described as sidewalk counselling, on the premise that these women they haven't really made an informed choice. The assumption is that when they get into the abortion clinic, that we have got some kind of vested interest in propelling them in some kind of conveyor belt to ending their pregnancy. And so therefore you need to intervene in some way to give them the other side of the story. So what our clients see are pictures of aborted fetuses, which I'm sure that Gregg will probably show us later on, of quite late-term fetuses in parts, which clearly very distressing to everyone. You are distributing leaflets which contain very bizarre descriptions of the risks of abortion, which are in no way substantiated really by any of the medical evidence. And the result of it is that a woman who is trying to access legal health care is basically presented with an array, a performance from yourselves, when really she hasn't come along for a debate, she hasn't come along for a discussion, she's come to access care from a reputable organisation. And many of the women find this quite distressing. I would say nearly all of them find it quite disturbing. And I really do not think that this is okay. I think that this is a wrong, I think it is immoral action to take against people who are, after all, a quite vulnerable time in their particular lives. So what I would say is that originally I was asked to debate on whether or not I thought that there should be more laws to make this illegal. And I said I wasn't really interested in debating that because I actually don't think that there should be laws that make the protests illegal. I don't think that it should be made illegal to show pictures outside clinics. I think you should be able to display any literature that you want to display in any place that you want to display it. But I do think that it is morally wrong and reprehensible for you to be harassing women and approaching women and displaying images which I think are deliberately intended to distress the women who are accessing these clinics. In fact, I think that it's inhumane behaviour for you to be treating women who are seeking help and advice as what I feel is stooges, props in a kind of political street theatre. You are opposed to abortion, some of you. You think that abortion is wrong. You think that it should not be that it should not be legal. But what you are doing is using these women as kind of walk-on parts in your street theatre to illustrate that it's wrong. And I think that that's an appalling way to be treating people who are who are trying to access clinical care. So I said to Gregg, when we were invited onto, I think it was the Radio 4 Today programme, that basically I felt very strongly that women who were attending our clinics were not doing so to make a gesture. They weren't coming to our clinics as a statement of support for abortion. They weren't even coming to our clinics because they felt that abortion was right. And that if you wanted to debate abortion, you should really debate abortion with me. You should debate abortion with people who are saying that it is a right thing for women to be able to access. But you should leave those women who are simply making that choice out of the picture. Because for the women who are coming to us, they're not coming to us to make a statement. They're coming to us to resolve a very deeply personal problem. So what I would always say to you is that if you want to discuss the rights and wrongs of abortion, then really you need to be doing it with advocates, and you really need to be leaving our patients very well alone. Now, it was interesting because Gregg's response at that time was basically to say, well, actually, he wasn't that interested in debating. Because the way that he looked at it and the way that you looked at it was that this wasn't really an abstract issue of legal or political debate. That what you were really concerned to do was to dissuade those women and to stop the abortions from taking place. And I can see that there are some nods from some of you in the audience here. What you were about stopping the abortions from taking place. And that, to my mind, is where things really become illegitimate. Because what we're talking about here is you having a particular view about whether or not you think that this is right and wrong, interfering with women who are engaging not in a public protest, but you are intervening in a way that seeks to stop their particular care. Now, I think that for you to be approaching women in this way is not a public protest, it's an intervention. I think it's morally wrong, I think it's reprehensible, and that's why I'm really asking the House to support this motion, that women who are accessing abortion clinics should not be used as props in a political argument. Of course, what really lies behind the debate here, and I think this is really probably what we need to be discussing, is not really the rules of protest that are being contested, but the contested nature of abortion itself, because that's really what we're talking about here. And for me, I admit, I do regard abortion as being a legitimate clinical procedure. I regard it as a backup that women need to their contraception if we are able to have control over our fertility. I think that the decision about how a woman controls her fertility is a moral decision. I think it's a deeply moral decision, but I think it's a moral decision for her and her partner to make, and not for you to make for her. And I believe strongly that it is ethically correct to let her control her reproductive destiny. I believe that it is wrong to accord the fetus an equal value to that woman. I actually believe that it is wrong to reduce the status of a woman with dreams, with ambitions, with memories, with hopes of what she wants to do for the future. A woman who has a sense of herself and a sense of the difference that she will make to the world. For you to reduce the status of that woman to the status of a beating heart and human DNA that is the embryo, of something that is living in the sense that it is not dead, that's human in the sense that it's not a gerbil, but does not even know that it is alive and has no self-consciousness. To me, that is an abhorrent way to look at humanity and to look at what people are. We are more than our flesh and our bones. We are more than beating hearts. We are more than our DNA. And it is that is what is more that makes us people and makes us worthy of respect. So that's where I stand on it. I think that you see it differently, and I respect your view. I understand the fact that you disagree, and I accept your view that you believe that it is the beating heart and that it is the human DNA that gives us importance. And I can see people nodding here. You know, I accept that that is. But I disagree with you, just as I disagree with those who believe that killing animals for meat is murder. I accept that they believe that animals have the same rights as humans. I respect their right to believe that, but I think that they are wrong and do not have the right, should not be accorded the ability to intervene against those of us who are acting in a way that we think is morally intact. I understand those people who think that experimenting on rats or rabbits or chimpanzees or gorillas to find cures to diseases that cause suffering in humanity. I understand those people who think that it is morally wrong for scientists to do that because they accord mice and rabbits and chimpanzees and gorillas and so on with the same status that they accord to people who are suffering from the diseases that scientists are trying to cure. But I believe that those scientists that are trying to cure those diseases have the moral upper hand. And that is, those are the people that I stand with morally. And I believe that the staff that we employ at BPAS, who are striving to provide women with lawful medical care, that are striving to help them to make the decisions that they need to make about their own lives, are the people who really do have the superiority morally in this discussion. For the purposes of debate, and I'm coming to a close now, but for the purposes of debate, I have to accept that we reach a kind of an impasse. And I was very interested to read, in fact, one of the writers who I think probably knows Gregg well, Francis Beckwith, who makes the point that, you know, the issue is very simply laid out. If the embryo or fetus does not have protected status that we give to people, then no justification for abortion is needed. If the embryo is not equivalent to a human woman, to a human living person, then no justification for abortion is needed. But he makes the point that if it does, if you genuinely believe that the embryo and that person are of moral equivalence, then no justification for abortion is possible. I can see how you would believe that. And I can see how, therefore, we are unlikely to agree within this room. But what I will say is this. When we walk out of this room, there is no argument. Abortion is legal. And women are entitled to this clinical care. And you are not entitled to stop them. The status of the embryo may be contested. It may absolutely be contested. And indeed, I accept that it is contested. And it's indeed been even contested by theologians within the Catholic Church. For many, many centuries, Catholic theologians have been trying to work out when ensoulment takes place and whether or not embryos will be resurrected and so on and so forth. And that has been a very, very serious debate within the Church. And that is absolutely fair enough. But what I understand from Catholic theologians is where there is doubt, that is when conscience comes in. Now, I believe strongly that every woman that we treat and every doctor who operates for us is more than a beating heart, and more than human DNA, and more than bones and flesh. They are persons with consciences. And they will wrestle with their consciences about whether or not what they are doing is right. And they are the people who should be making those decisions for themselves. And I support their right to do just that. So simply, in conclusion, I would ask of you in this room to support that motion. And I would ask you outside of this room to leave our patients alone. They're not part of your political debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anne. Now, our second speaker, Gregg.
Thank you, Brendan. Thank you, Ms. Furedi. Thank you for coming here this evening. Let me begin by saying that Ms. Furedi began an attempt to defend her indefensible position on the display of abortion photos on sidewalks outside her clinics, and then went wildly off topic and started defending the right to kill babies, which is not the issue in dispute here tonight. So I'm not going to address myself principally to her off-topic ruminations. I'm going to focus on the issue that we were agreed would be the principal point in contention. Everything about the British Pregnancy Advisory Service from its name on is about deception. BPAS is committed to monopolizing the narrative on abortion. BPAS, I think, with just stunning arrogance, demands that only Ann Furedi have the ear of people, women, pregnant women contemplating an abortion, and nobody else has any right to have any meaningful interaction with those women. That's a shocking contention, and I reject it, and I think thinking people would reject it. That's the language of somebody who is pro-abortion, not somebody who is pro-choice. Somebody who only wants these women to hear one side of the argument, not the other side. And speaking of arguments, Brendan, and I say this respectfully, echoed what we knew Ms. Furedi was going to say about our activities, referring to us somewhat derisively as protesters. We don't protest abortion. We expose abortion. When you hold up an aborted baby photo, abortion protests itself. You don't have to protest it. So we're not about protesting in the sense that we say Ann Furedi is an evil person, or BPAS is a den of iniquity, or people who have abortions are morally deficient. We want women to simply see who the baby is and what abortion does to the baby, for the very simple reason that the humanity of the baby and the inhumanity of abortion are inexpressible. There are no words that are adequate to convey the full reality of the embryo's majesty, if you will, and of abortion's inhumanity. And we live in a very visual culture, and the most important thing that I can say here tonight is that some percentage of the customers, and I'm going to call them customers rather than patients, who patronize Ms. Furedi's establishments will change their minds about abortion if they see it. It's not every woman. I don't even know if it's most women, but some percentage, if you show them the horror of abortion, will change their minds about killing their babies. We know that because we see these women all the time. And we see women all the time who come up to us tearfully and say, if I would have seen your pictures before I aborted, I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have done it. I would go so far as to contend that BPAS is engaged in something uncomfortably akin to consumer fraud, systematically, knowingly withholding information from women, some percentage of whom would reject abortion if they were given access to that information. Those women are not going to come to us. We have to go to them. This is a public sidewalk. We have every right to be there. Ms. Furedi I haven't even gotten to my presentation yet. I'm so scandalized by what I heard Ms. Furedi say. I might not even get to what I came here to say tonight, frankly. She accuses us of stopping women from entering abortion clinics. If that were true, it would be against the law. Call the police and have us arrested. We don't stop women from going into abortion clinics. We show them what Ms. Furedi is going to do to their baby once they get inside. And then it's up to them to decide whether they're going to go in or not go in. We have only the power of persuasion, and the most persuasive tool we have is a picture. It's just a picture. Ms. Furedi is not afraid of our words, but she is afraid of our pictures, and she should be afraid of our pictures. This is the face of abortion in Britain, a nondescript building. Doesn't look threatening, doesn't look menacing, but I'm going to show you what goes on inside that building right here. Many, many women, if shown that picture, will reject abortion, and we have a legal right to show them that picture. We have a moral responsibility to show them that picture, and we're going to show them that picture over the objection of the people who do this to babies inside and don't want their customers to see this reality. If you go to the BPAS website, you'll see a number of videos, 3 of which purport to depict abortion, not in any direct way, only quite indirectly. And you'll discover that for medical abortions, the video features the activities that allegedly occur in the run-up to the abortion, and then the screen goes black, the screen fades to black, and the video resumes by showing you what happens after the abortion. Ms. Furedi doesn't want anybody to see what goes on in the middle, what goes on where the screen gets blacked out and the momentary fade from one segment to another. Let me show you the babies alive in the womb who are being killed by chemical abortion, a 6-week embryo, a 7-week embryo. And you get a very, very different sense of whether abortion is a morally inconsequential act.
By 6 weeks, the cerebral hemispheres are growing disproportionately faster than other sections of the brain. The embryo begins to make spontaneous and reflexive movements. Such movement is necessary to promote normal neuromuscular development. A touch to the mouth area causes the embryo to reflexively withdraw its head. The external ear is beginning to take shape. By 6 weeks, blood cell formation is underway in the liver, where lymphocytes are now present. This type of white blood cell is a key part of the developing immune system. The diaphragm, the primary muscle used in breathing, is largely formed by 6 weeks. A portion of the intestine now protrudes temporarily into the umbilical cord. This normal process, called physiologic herniation, makes room for other developing organs in the abdomen. At 6 weeks, the handplates develop a subtle flattening. Brainwaves have been recorded as early as 6 weeks and 2 days. Nipples appear along the sides of the trunk. shortly before reaching their final location, on the front of the chest. By 6.5 weeks, the elbows are distinct. The fingers are beginning to separate and hand movement can be seen. Bone formation, called ossification, begins within the clavicle or collarbone and the bones of the upper and lower jaw.
I brought with me tonight, and I can email you these sites if you'd like to read them, a number of articles from the New York Times, from Time Magazine, from Newsweek Magazine, that describe what happens when a woman is sent home with RU-486 or some other chemical abortifacient, and she aborts into the toilet and looks down and sees her embryo. And what a shocking sight this is. And some abortion clinics in the United States caution the woman that what she might see in the toilet could be shocking, advise her to have some helper with her. If she can't cope with the shock of looking into the toilet, she should arrange for someone else to be there to confirm in the toilet that the baby has passed, etc. That's the kind of thing that changes one's sense of who this baby is and what abortion does to the baby, even very, very early on. BPAS also has its 2 surgical abortion videos, one using a local anesthetic and the other using a general, apparently a twilight sedative or whatever. Same story. You get the run-up to the abortion, then the screen fades to black, and then immediately you're in the recovery room. This is what actually goes on. This is what abortion actually looks like. These are the abortions that I'm about to show you that Ms. Furedi does not want her potential customers to see still photos of. Some women who schedule abortions are actually quite ambivalent about what it is they are about to do. They waffle back and forth, and they are amenable to persuasion. They are open to dialogue. And we have the right and the responsibility to attempt to engage them. Ms. Furedi said we don't engage anymore. We absolutely engage, but we want that engagement to be well-informed. We want them to know who their baby is, and we want them to know what BPAS is going to do to their baby if they go inside. That's engagement. Ms. Furedi mentioned what she referred to, and please forgive me if I get the word wrong, bizarre, or some disapproving reference to what our literature and our counselors say about the sequelae of abortion, which is a Latin term that simply means the side effects of abortion. And again, because of the time limitations tonight, I can't get into all of this, but I will email to anybody who wants it citations for the abstracts in peer-reviewed clinical studies that appear in the periodic literature of medicine, linking abortion with breast cancer and linking abortion causally with all kinds of mental illness kinds of problems in terms of a much stronger predisposition, measurably stronger toward these kinds of problems among women who have aborted. What we hear from BPAS is what we heard for decades from the tobacco industry. Cigarette smoking didn't cause cancer, didn't cause lung cancer. And of course that was laughably, cynically, exploitative. The tobacco industry hired scientists to dummy up studies that got published and were totally counterintuitive. And the idea that aborting a baby is safer for a woman than carrying to term is, I mean, it's preposterous on its face. Ms. Furedi says she doesn't think that displaying these signs on the sidewalk outside her clinic should be against the law, but the Crown prosecutor did after being pressured by BPAS supporters who were calling the police and pressuring the prosecutor, the police to arrest, the prosecutor to prosecute. And thank heaven we prevailed in Sussex County Court and got a decision that it's absolutely lawful to display these pictures. And on the day this picture was taken, and if you'll forgive a personal reference, that's yours truly in the middle, in front of the Brighton BPAS clinic, a young woman approached us, 22 weeks pregnant, had scheduled an appointment to have an abortion, and she changed her mind. And she speaks for many, many women who, if they get the rest of the story, these are women who have a functioning conscience. These are women who are open to the truth, and if you show them the truth, you really can change their minds. But it's a truth that abortion providers do not want women to see, and it's a truth that abortion advocates don't want women to see. When we display these kinds of pictures in public, we frequently draw opposition carrying bed sheets or some other object in an attempt to cover up these pictures, which raises the very, very awkward question: if abortion is a socially responsible act, why do its defenders not want anyone to see what it looks like? And the answer is because lots of people will change their minds once they see who the baby is and what abortion really does to the baby. This happens to us over and over again. This is Oxford, right here in the UK, same thing. Students came out, instead of making an argument about abortion, they simply tried to cover up the signs, down to the level of somebody at Brighton knocking a sign down and sitting on it. In Brendan's magazine, Ms. Furedi recently wrote that, something that she said here tonight, that showing these pictures should be a matter of free speech everywhere but in front of abortion clinics. And in the United States in 1965, Martin Luther King attempted to confront white people in the city of Chicago who were discriminating against black people for housing. And the city administration said to King, in essence, you can say and show and do anything you want in the black community, but we're not letting you come into the white community and engage and bother and upset people there. And the courts ruled, ultimately vindicating Dr. King's position, that the right to speak to an empty room is not free speech. The right to speak anywhere, but the one place where your target audience is not free speech. It's censorship. And this is only one of the many discontinuities, dislocations in Ms. Furedi's very Orwellian approach to all of this. She says, I believe in free speech absolutely, except when I don't. And I don't in front of my clinics because I'm going to monopolize the narrative in front of my clinics. I'm going to be the only one presenting information. And oh, by the way, it's frequently distorted. The last thing I will say is if you go to the National Health Service website under the informed consent provisions, you will see something very relevant to the discussion we're having here tonight. NHS says that it is unethical for healthcare providers to withhold disturbing information from a patient concerning that patient's condition merely because the patient might be upset and objects to the disclosure being made to them. The patient might say, I don't want to hear this. Stop. Don't tell me this. NHS says, you got to tell them anyway, whether they like it or not. And that's just as true of women going into abortion clinics as it is of people with cancer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Gregg. Thank you to both our speakers. I'm going to ask them a couple of questions before we throw it out to you, the audience. Anne, firstly, picking up on Gregg's point about how these activities are designed to provide women with information that your charity is denying to them. Primarily the fact that they are carrying a potential baby and that potential baby is about to be killed. Is that your experience, that women are ignorant of the fact of what's happening in abortion, that they don't know that it involves the killing of a baby, or is your experience something different to that?
Well, two kind of short points on this, really, you see, is first of all, there's a wrong conception that my organisation wants women to have an abortion as part of their encounter with us. Most of the women who come to us will decide to proceed with an abortion, but about 15% don't. They have a discussion with a counsellor, as every woman does, and then they decide that they won't continue the pregnancy. That they will continue the pregnancy. The point being is that changing their mind is it's not like a win for you and a loss for us. For a woman to come to the right decision for herself is an absolute win for everybody. That's exactly what you want, is for her to make the decision that's the right decision for her. So there isn't any need for us to try and conceal or try and obfuscate about what abortion involves. In fact, you see, I would use exactly the point that Gregg finished on, which is that, it is considered an important principle of good clinical care that people know what is going to happen to them. To give informed consent to procedure, you have to. And this whole business about trying to conceal what happens. A lot of our doctors have week-by-week books illustrating fetal development that they will show to the women, because women will want to know exactly what does my fetus look like now, what will happen during the abortion procedure. So that's a discussion that somebody has, whether or not it's in the form of the rather salacious pictures, which are very disturbing, that you give. Clearly it's not like that because it's clinical information. But so, no, I think that women are very informed by their procedure.
Gregg, I was very struck by your comment that I think you said there are no words. And I was wondering if the way in which you and your supporters fall back on quite gruesome imagery is actually a moral failure on your part, and a failure to come up with a substantial moral argument against women's autonomy, and therefore you have to do something that looks a little bit like emotional blackmail. How would you respond to that?
Well, perhaps William Wilberforce was an emotional blackmailer because he gave speeches and wrote essays against the slave trade for 30 years in the Parliament, and nothing happened until he started using pictures. Because he reasoned that slavery in England wasn't in England. It was in the British West Indies. And all the Brits saw of slavery was coffee, sugar, molasses, rum. They didn't see the horrifying human cost that was being paid to produce those commodities until Wilberforce began to use pictures. These are pictures that Ms. Furedi says are disturbing. Our pictures can't be disturbing unless abortion is disturbing. And if abortion is disturbing, let's let people see it. And Ms. Furedi multiple times here tonight and for the last 10 years has made reference to what she does in terms of abortion care. Is abortion care or is it an act of violence? Seeing these pictures give people a very different impression of whether it's care or violence. Ms. Furedi just made a reference to the question of whether this is the right decision for the mother. We also want the mother to contemplate the question, is this the right decision for your baby? And your baby's not just a blob of tissue. And abortion doesn't, as the BPAS website very disingenuously says, abortion does not use gentle suction to remove the pregnancy. Abortion eviscerates and decapitates and dismembers babies, tears them limb from limb, and in the late term, injects them with digoxin or potassium chloride or some other agent that's designed to induce a heart attack, either directly into the baby's heart or into the amniotic fluid. 22, 23, 24 weeks. A heart attack, by any reasonable calculation, is an excruciatingly painful experience, and these are babies old enough to feel pain. There's an abundance of neuroscience that confirms that by 20 weeks, a baby is initially able to feel pain, and we know that because there are 21, 22-week-old babies in the isolates in neonatal intensive care units, and they clearly feel pain in response to noxious stimuli.
And I just want to tease out a point Gregg made earlier about free speech. And he is suggesting that your line on this is that you believe in absolute free speech except outside your clinics. So is he right? Do you have a but behind your commitment to free speech? Or are you saying that these kind of protests or gatherings are not a free speech issue? How would you explain that?
First of all, I'm definitely not saying that the argument should be prohibited from outside of our clinics. I've never argued for bubble zones, as they've had in the States, outside clinics, and I don't. It's just that my understanding of the principle of free speech is that free speech is really about the freedom of expression. It's about the importance of being able to express yourself, to discuss ideas, it fits along things like freedom of religion and so on. And I think it's vitally, vitally important. What I'm saying is that there's a debate that you have, which is a discussion about the rights and wrongs of something. There is the situation that somebody is in when they're seeking care. And I don't think that your right to say something, I don't think that freedom of speech is reducible to the right to say anything at any time, any place, and anywhere. And I think it's certainly not the right to force someone to listen to you. And it seems to me that when a woman is coming into a clinic, that's not the right time to be trying to take her aside and to have an argument with her about the rights and wrongs. It seems to me that that's simply not a good time to be carrying that out. I'm not asking that it be made illegal for you to do it. I'm just asking you to think morally about why you do it. And the reason why I say that, and the reason why I draw the distinction, is because, those pictures, of course they are really upsetting. They really are. And they're horrible. And I find it disturbing, actually, that anybody wants to show them. When I first took on the job of running BPAS, I knew I'd be talking a lot about late abortion. And one of the things that I did was to take myself into theatre with two of our doctors, because I felt if I was going to talk about it, I really should see what it involved. And I stood by those doctors, and I watched them carry out those procedures, and I saw the film, and I experienced what it was like to be, and I, experienced the experience of it, smelt the smell of it, and so on, was there with the women, and so on. And I can tell you, no woman ever wants to go through that. You don't have to, she knows what's going on. You don't have to stand outside with a placard and show her. She knows what is going on in that clinic because it is indeed discussed with her. But the point is that she has that abortion, not because she's wanting to have that abortion, but because she has a reason in her life that means that not having the abortion is worse for her than going through that procedure. And that's what you fail to understand, is that it is a procedure that happens in context. And that's why I think your use of these pictures is pornographic and distasteful in exactly the same way that photographs of erect penises and spread legs is pornographic in terms of sex, that you take the image of it and you separate it out from the context. And I do not think that's a free speech issue. I think it's a bad taste and an issue of abuse of those women.
Gregg, I want to ask you, following on from Ann's points there, when does your activities cross the line into being harassment of women? And I want to pick up on Ann's point that just because you have the right to do something doesn't mean that it's necessarily moral. For example, we can accept that the Westboro Baptist Church has the right to protest at an American soldier's funeral, but we can also say that it is immoral because that's not the place at which to protest against American wars overseas. Can you accept that, yes, you have the right to do what you do, but at the same time, it's an immoral thing to do?
I think it's immoral to systematically withhold information that were it shared with some women, they would change their minds about aborting. That's what's immoral. That's what's unethical. That's what violates the whole concept, the spirit, the letter of the informed consent requirements that healthcare professionals have. I mean, this has become so bizarre. This whole sort of debate, not just here tonight, but I mean in the broader sense, is so bizarre that torturing babies to death isn't immoral, but showing pictures of babies being tortured to death is immoral. I mean, it just sort of sucks the wind out of you. I mean, what do you even say in the face of that level of moral confusion? Pornography, comparing our pictures to pornography. Pornography dehumanizes human beings. Our pictures humanize human beings. That's a very, very big distinction. We want them to see the whole picture. That's what context is about. These pictures don't decontextualize abortion. These pictures give women the full context so they're able to better decide whether whatever it is that's causing them to consider an abortion is worth what the abortion is going to do to the baby. Ms. Furedi says that these women know what's going to go on. I think at some level she's right. At some level I'll concede the point that God writes his truth even on the unregenerate heart. Everyone can intuit that abortion at some level is evil, but almost nobody understands how evil until they actually see it because it's inexpressibly evil.
Right, I'm now going to open it up to the floor for questions and comments. I'm going to take a batch of questions, 4 or 5 at a time. So if Ann and Gregg could write down questions you want to answer, particularly ones that are focused at you. Please keep your questions brief so that we can have as much to and fro between you and the speakers as possible. And there's a roving microphone who's going to come to you. So, right, first there, yes.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, my name's David Bowden. I'm from the Battle of Ideas Festival, and I'm here. I'm actually chairing a debate with Ann and a number of different other people about the same kind of discussion and trying to put it within the context of clampdowns on civil liberties across the board. So that's next Tuesday at 4. So if you don't feel as if you've settled the debate tonight, please feel free to come along then. But around the debate, I've been thinking a lot about tolerance as an idea, the kind of notion of tolerance, and what a kind of important, a kind of invention that is to enable us to live a civilized life within society. It's actually a kind of acceptance that, even though we deeply and profoundly disagree on a lot of issues, that, that we try to have things out publicly in the realm of ideas. We no longer sort of lived in the barbarism we had before the kind of Enlightenment presence of tolerance. We accept the kind of the differences that go on, and we have this debate out publicly. Now, my concern that happens in this debate seems to be that there's a retreat from having this debate out publicly. And I mean, just correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see anti-abortion protesters often out in the high street on Saturday afternoon. When people were out with, when you have wives, girlfriends, mothers, sisters, people who would use abortion. It seems to me that in having these protests outside the clinic, there's a sort of retreat away from having this debate out within society and focusing on people when they are quite vulnerable, when actually ultimately you are attempting to prevent them. So I just wonder whether that has grave moral repercussions for the notion of tolerance, really.
Thank you for that. And yes, in front, yeah.
Hi, my name's Bea. So it seems to be that the reason why we present these images are presented outside abortion clinics is a belief that there isn't enough information within the clinics. And given that BPAS, it stands for British Pregnancy Advisory Service, and just coupled with a couple of people I know who've had abortions, and actually they came out feeling like they didn't actually they weren't informed of what was going to happen, and that was a problem, and they probably wouldn't have gone through with it had they just known what the procedure was like. And so my question, I suppose, is, what advice is given within them, and would advisory counsellors perhaps create a better buffer? What's the alternative? Because if there isn't information, then how can we present it in a better way?
Thank you. And we'll take these two gentlemen in front there, and then we'll come back to Anne and Gregg.
Yes, again, to Anne, really, to follow up the previous one. A friend of mine phoned up BPAS with a view to inquiring about an abortion. The first question she asked was about her postcode, presumably to find the local BPAS centre. The second request was for her credit card details. It doesn't give a lot of confidence. Well, this is her experience as she relates it to me. It doesn't give a lot of confidence in a concern that she might have received some advice about her consultation. Second one, slightly off there, but a very quick one. You said these gruesome pictures shouldn't be shown around at the actual point of the place where the abortion takes place. The governments seem to disagree. You will have seen yourself the very gruesome pictures of people with throat cancer, which are actually on the cigarette packs, exactly at the point of usage. Would you like to comment? Because the government would seem to disagree with your view on that.
The argument seems to be being framed from the point of view that, from Anne's point of view, the users of the clinics are adequately informed by the people inside of it, and from Gregg's point of view, that they aren't adequately informed. Would an increasing in professional standards, and in the advisors and the doctors within the clinic, be an adequate safeguard from Gregg's point of view? And does Anne think that there's any scope for that to happen in practice in the future?
Thank you. Okay, Anne, would you like to come back on those questions?
Yeah, well, just let me dismiss the credit card thing. Why would we be asking anyone for credit card details when almost all of the procedures that we carry out are on behalf of the NHS, and certainly to resident women? It's just an absolute nonsense. So, and, in fact, the reasons why we're asking addresses is so that we can ensure that women are getting the treatment, and indeed that they're entitled to, and indeed that we're in a position to be able to work with their doctors who are providing them all-round care. I think, in fact, the interesting point that was raised was really this kind of equivalence between this kind of demonstration of images of bits of fetus with the kind of advertising that's going on in relation to cigarettes, because I think it's a very, very good way of looking at what the difference is between abortion and, say, smoking. You know, smoking is something that someone is voluntarily going into, and the information that's on the packet is basically saying if you smoke, you are putting yourself at risk of this particular disease. And it has a certain shock value in doing this. You know, it's almost as though what you're basically, you know, mixing up is that a woman who is presenting for an abortion has an unwanted pregnancy. She is in a situation where she is seeking help. She's either going to have a baby or she is going to terminate that particular pregnancy. And what she needs is the information and a support to be able to make that decision one way or the other. What she doesn't need is an illustration of an aborted fetus saying this is what abortion involves. When you know, that's the discussion. What abortion involves is precisely the discussion that she's going to be having with the counsellor and with the doctor when she's inside the clinic. So do I think that women are fully informed? I absolutely do. I think the right place for women to be having counselling, for women to be having advice, is in a supportive environment inside the clinic. And I don't think that this kind of waving pictures around serves any function at all other than to try to scare women away from entering the clinic. And the question that I'd put to Gregg is, what is this intervention about? Are you trying to debate abortion with women, or are you trying to dissuade women from having abortions? What is it? Because I don't think the two things are the same.
Gregg.
Ms. Furedi has repeatedly made reference to the inaccurate characterization of our activities as forcing someone to listen to our point of view. People who approach BPAS clinics and see our presence frequently just look away and ignore us. And we respect their right to do that. We don't chase them into the clinic trying to get in their faces with pictures that they're trying to avoid. They have every right to not look. And we have every right to hold up the pictures. That's the balance. And it works very, very well in the United States, and I think it works well here as well. Ms. Furedi makes reference to unborn babies in the context of gerbils and hamsters in previous discussions. Comparing human beings to animals is the language of genocide. And it recalls to mind the Zong case right here in the UK, the slave ship, in which slaves were thrown overboard in an attempted insurance fraud to make a claim on the insurer, insuring the slaves as cargo. And when a man named Collingwood, who was the slave ship captain, was brought to trial over all of this, the judge, Lord Mansfield, ruled that throwing slaves overboard was no more actionable than throwing horses overboard. This is the language of genocide. This is the idea that a human being, the human being's humanity is in dispute, that it's being contested, that some human beings are actually subhuman, and smoking puts smokers at risk, yes, but abortion not only puts the mother at risk, it puts her baby at risk. Ms. Furedi repeatedly says that she has only one patient. Well, We want the woman to know that this is not merely a pregnancy that she's talking about, terminating. This is a baby that she's considering being killed. And that's where the pictures come in. Ms. Furedi says that these women don't need an aborted baby photo waved in their faces. We know lots of women who need an aborted baby photo waved in their faces, and we know that because they said, "Thank God that you were here. Thank heaven you waved this picture in my face, or I would have killed my baby." Ms. Furedi pretends that those women don't exist. They do exist.
Okay, I'm going to take some questions from this side. So if we can have this lady in the middle with the glasses. Further back. Further back. Yes. Exactly, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Kerry Dingle from the education charity World Right and citizen TV station World Bites. Really, Greg, I would just like your comments on this, but it does sound very disingenuous when you talk about providing extra information, because you're not just providing some extra clinical information, you're basically waving your photographs around or whatever and calling these women murderers. And you're evading the very real debate which Anne has so powerfully presented to us about the very difference between the fetus and a living, conscious woman. And I'd like your comments on that, which you seem to have avoided. Secondly, how do you justify your inhumanity to the woman who doesn't, somehow you get to decide what happens to her in the rest of her life? You've denied her right to make that private decision and go through that. You somehow are the one that seems to have the right to decide on her future. And just very finally, I find it shocking and a denial of black agency to equate what you're doing with that of Martin Luther King. And I would also point out how wrong you are on the slave trade. William Wilberforce, a liberal, did very little to end the slave trade. It was the slaves, if you look at the revolution in Haiti, who really upset the apple cart and overthrew slavery. And you're denying women their agency, and you've denied blacks in the civil rights movement their agency, and you've also got the slave trade completely wrong.
We'll come back in a moment. Okay, thank you. And yes, this lady here in the third row.
Hi, I just wanted to come back to the idea of emotional blackmail that we were talking about earlier. And I was kind of wondering if I can't really see that either side is completely innocent of it. And in relation to those videos, I haven't seen them, I just saw them on the clips. So in terms of the fact that you just see the before and after shots of the abortion, that to me seems a very emotional rather than a clinical sort of approach. And I just wondered what your response was to that. And equally for Gregg. So I can understand that you think women need to see these images, but I would kind of question the idea of any sort of surgery that has no ethical dimension to it. For example, brain surgery or heart surgery, anyone going in for that sort of procedure, if you presented similar images to those people, would there not be a certain percentage who would back out having seen them? So I just think that's my question.
Okay, good question. And yes, this gentleman here, please.
Perhaps if I may, could I ask Anne, when do human beings become more than their DNA?
That's a very good question, and a hard one. Okay, and then there's two ladies here in the middle. We'll take those two. The lady with the glasses first, and then... Oh, they've both got glasses. The two ladies with the glasses. Thank you.
We're everywhere, ladies with glasses. Greg, you talked about BPAS deceiving women and perpetuating deception, which I think is kind of ironic when you then put up a great big slide saying if you have an abortion, you will get breast cancer. I don't know how many women here know women who have had breast cancer, but there's certainly a lot of it about. It's a horrible thing. You are saying that it's a punishment for having an abortion, when in fact... Oh, really? Let's go back to the slide, shall we, Greg? Let's go back to the slide.
Okay, please, can we let her finish her point? Thank you. Carry on.
Your science might say that abortion causes breast cancer. Your science might say that abortion causes depression. The science that is out there that has been reviewed again and again and again does not support that finding. Now, you're entitled to say that you do not believe the science that actually has looked at all these studies on abortion and breast cancer and found them flawed. And you might say you don't believe all the meta-analyses of the studies on abortion and depression. But this notion that you're there telling women the truth about these studies, I really think needs to be challenged, and I really think you need to do more to justify it. I also think, just a small point, when you say that BPAS says that it alone should have the ear of women, I really do think you're underestimating the extent to which the women who go to have an abortion have talked to many, many, many people on the way to the abortion clinic. They've talked to their friends, they've talked to the church if they're part of a church, they've talked to their family, they've thought about their decisions, right? And they have made their decision usually by the time they get to BPAS. So I would say to you that these attempts to provide a kind of a last-minute turnaround outside of the abortion clinics are really a sign of the weakness of the movement that you're trying to promote, rather than anything that is in any way morally virtuous.
Thank you. And the lady in front, yes. Yeah.
Yes, Ms. Furedi, you stated that a fetus doesn't have the moral equivalence, whatever you meant by that, to the woman, the child's mother, the fetus, with her dreams and potentials and aspirations. What is the difference between the baby at that stage and the newborn baby, who also, its potential isn't known? It can't have aspirations, it can't have dreams, and yet it's infanticide. So what is the difference? What do you mean by the moral equivalence? How can you talk about morals in that case?
Okay. Right, some very good questions, some very strong points, particularly on the question of when human life starts, which I'm very keen to hear both speakers' views on that. But Gregg, would you like to come back on any of those questions?
Let me apologize in advance for the fact that I have a hearing loss, and so if I'm sure I missed some parts of some questions. I'm not trying to be evasive, I assure you. If you think I missed your question, please repeat it, and I'll try harder. Winston Churchill said, "We are two people separated by a common language," and I have to confess the hearing loss and the accent sometimes. I know you think I have an accent. I actually think you have an accent. Ms. Furedi said that this is not a matter of win-loss for CBR or BPAS, but it's very much a matter of win-loss for the mother and the baby. Very much a matter of win-loss. If this woman aborts, she's lost. She's lost potentially her health and absolutely her baby. The question was asked, do we think women need to see these images? That's up to the women. The women who don't think they need to see the images do this. They look away. And we respect that. We honor that. Here's what outrages me. And I have to confess to a real sense of rage that I feel in my heart right now. There is this very, very manipulative, exploitative attitude that BPAS and only BPAS will decide what information these women are exposed to. That is arrogance, and it is consumer fraud, since BPAS is obviously not a disinterested party in this transaction. It is profoundly misogynistic for Ms. Furedi and for BPAS to say that these women just can't take it. They just can't handle it. So let's hide the truth from them because distress is just too much. This is why we have a nanny state. Ms. Furedi talks constantly about a woman being unable to cope with an abortion, with her pregnancy, and as a consequence, she's justified in having an abortion at any point in pregnancy for any reason or no reason at all because she can't cope, and coping relates to health, which means mental health, and that justifies her killing her baby. We are creating a generation of people who can't cope with adversity because at the slightest burden, We look to the state, we look to the government to relieve us of that burden, even at the expense of a human life. When do human beings become more than their DNA? At the moment of fertilization. A lady intimated that we see abortion, or rather we see breast cancer as punishment for abortion. That's a preposterous thing to say. I don't know anybody, I've been doing this work for 23 years, I've never heard anybody in the pro-life movement say that. My friends, abortion is punishment enough for women who have aborted. Abortion will punish the woman every day of her life for the rest of her life, whether she admits it or not. No more punishment is necessary. We view these women as victims, not as people who need to be punished. We view them as people who merit our help, and we're prepared to give it to them. Finally, make women aware that this whole idea that women should only hear one side of the science debate, again, is absolutely intellectually dishonest. It flies in the face of every concept of academic freedom. The science here is in dispute. There are studies that find that abortion and breast cancer are causally linked, bulimia, alcohol addiction, drug addiction, and there are studies that find the opposite. Let's not just show women one side or the other side. Let's make them aware of the fact that the science is in dispute here, and let them make their own decisions.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg. Anne.
Well, I did think the point was quite well made from the floor, really, that we can have our own opinions, but we can't have our own facts. You know, facts are facts, really. And I have to say that the information that my organisation relies on when we talk about the risks and the sequelae of abortion, it's not BPAS research. It's nothing that I've made up. It's, you know, we take instruction on this from the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. Now, you get that, Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. This is not the Royal College of Abortion Doctors or the Royal College of Gynecologists who really want to work at BPAS. It's the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, because they are as concerned with women who want to have babies as they are concerned with the abortion side of it. So I trust them, actually, you know, and I think that my advice, if anybody really wants to get behind some of the facts about abortion and its effects, is that they could well do with looking up their guidance for what women requesting abortion should be told about the effects of it. So that's the first point. The second point that I'd make really on the point down here is that, you know, there's a point, I'm going to have to go back and look at the videos that you're pointing, because I can see why you might be suspicious about what goes on in the dark. And I need to go back and have a look at that. I'll tell you why I think it's like that. The reason why I think it's like that is because the videos really is this information for women about what they're going to experience when they come to BPAS. And actually, when that kind of the extraction of the fetus is taking place that was being shown in your video, the woman's kind of unconscious, so she's not seeing that. And I'll make the point on the early medical abortion point that the thing why we haven't got footage of that is because, do you want to see footage of a woman cramping and bleeding on the toilet? You know, I don't think that you need, or any woman really needs to see that footage. I think we can explain that to her, and I think it's better that we do, because I don't really think we need to rely on the images. The value of the fetus, I think, is a really crucial question, because, as I say, this really does underline the whole thing, doesn't it? You know, as I came back to the point to begin with, if you think there is that equivalence, then nothing can justify abortion. If you don't, then you can justify it. So when you talk about the value of the fetus, what I have to come back to and ask all the time really is, well, which fetus, which embryo? Because I tell you something, when I was undergoing infertility treatments, I was deeply concerned about the embryos that I had that were in storage and that were in the Petri dish. I accorded those with real moral value. And I think that, we do look at the wonder of embryonic life. We really do look at the wonder of that. And we accord it a huge moral value. But the point is how you weigh that up when there is a woman who is saying, I do not want to be pregnant. I cannot continue this pregnancy, because then what you're doing is you're basically saying what is the relative value that you are according it. And I will always give the moral primacy to that person who is making that request. So I'll stop.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to come out just for one more batch of questions, I'm afraid. So Anne and Greg, when you come back on these questions, it will also be your summary. So prepare any final closing remarks you want to make. I should also remind everyone that if you use Twitter, there is a hashtag for this debate, which is #abortiondebate. So if you aren't gutsy enough to stand up and make your point in front of everyone in the room, you can do it on your phones and put it on Twitter. Right, I'm going to go to the back of the room, please. Firstly, the lady in the red coat.
Thank you. Greg, I was going to say thank you for not thinking that I was vulnerable, but then you said that we're all victims and of need of help, so I can't thank you for that. Because I did want to say, it seems to me that you think I'm stupid. Because, and I think other people have said it, to say, and you keep going back to this, that it's Ann Furedi's voice only, and that I can't, in this world of information, can't find out if I'm pregnant and want to talk to my mates and families that have all sorts of different ideas about this. I want to go on the internet, I want to find your vulgar, horrible, ugly photographs. I can't. I can do all of that. And so when I cross the BPAS clinic, that doesn't make me evil, and it certainly doesn't make me stupid. And the other thing about it, quickly, is that I disagree with what you think of as a baby. And I do agree with Anne that we are more. And in a sense, I don't accept your thing about, oh, well, in 6 weeks or whenever it was, this fetus responded to something. That doesn't mean that fetus understands pain. For example, pain has to be a consciousness thing. So I disagree with you about all of that. I don't suppose we'll ever agree, but there you go.
Thank you. Yes, the lady next to you, yes.
Ann Furedi had talked about the women coming to the BPAS clinics accessing care. I'd just like to challenge her how she could improve the care for the women who come to her clinics who later go on to bitterly regret their abortions, and that it affects them for the rest of their lives.
Thank you. And this gentleman here. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you for that. I'm coming at this from a slightly different point of view, in the fact that I'm associated with an organisation that provides post-abortion counselling. And we are responsible for picking up the pieces of women who have been to Ann's clinic and been left high and dry. And lots of the women that we see, young women, older women, are not and have not been aware of the consequences of what an abortion would do to them, and the mental effect that it will have on them, and the guilt that remains with them for such a long time. So I take issue very much, so particularly when Anne uses words like moral, I take great issue with that. That you do not provide aftercare of a sufficient standard which stops the amount of women that come to see us and come in bits and pieces over what has happened. The guilt that they have to live with, and we've seen women who have carried that for 30, 40 years. So I feel that to talk about care is derisive in this case.
Thank you. And yes.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree with what you've just said, but at the same time, kind of not really flipping it around. But Greg, to you, I kind of ask,
I don't know whether if as much energy and resources and manpower went into your cause, as it were, earlier on, whether that would be more effective and also, in my opinion, I think less questionably immoral. I think that in the town where I'm from, there's a pregnancy crisis sort of advised counselling service, so maybe a similar thing. And they work with women who are pregnant and perhaps considering having an abortion, and also women who have had abortions and therefore, or perhaps kind of regret it or not. And they believe essentially what you believe as strongly as you believe it, but it's kind of doing it in a way that is less, I don't know, I just imagine a young girl who's pregnant, and I'm not for abortion, I don't agree with that at all, but I just imagine there are loads of women who are in vulnerable positions, and I just think if you put as much energy into solving the issue much earlier on and kind of educating women, if you think there's a gap in that, do it. This just seems like a last minute solution, if that makes sense. I just think that more energy should be poured into it in a more, sounds idealistic, but more loving way, and probably more effective way, rather than slapping images in people's faces. Start from the beginning when women are considering it, when women are teenagers.
Thank you. And I can see a pink arm on this side. Yeah.
Just a couple of quick points. Firstly, time and time again, when I've been outside the clinic, I've heard women say, if only you'd been here when I went in for my abortion. They say this to us all the time when we're outside. So we are here to help women. And just on an informed choice, you know, the women that we speak to, they don't know about all the help that's available to them in London to help them to carry out, you know, their pregnancy. And they need to be, you know, we're there to help them so they know about the crisis pregnancy centres, so that they know that there's a real alternative to abortion.
Okay, if people can keep their questions really short now, I might have time for 3 more, I'm afraid, that's all. But if we can have this lady on the right-hand side with the glasses. Yeah.
Hi. I really agree with the lady in the red jacket at the back, where she says, you know, women aren't just silly and stupid and completely uninformed before they approach the BPAS clinic to go and have an abortion. They've obviously thought about it beforehand. And I think this kind of conspiratorial way of looking at BPAS as this highly partial organisation which is simply interested in getting as many women through their doors to have abortions as possible is really just another way of saying, Greg, and I think this comes through in the way you've spoken about, you know, and the language you've used to describe abortion, is that in your ideal world, what you would love is for there to not be any provision for women to have abortions at all. You would really love it if BPAS and other abortion providers did not exist. So then for you to turn around and say that you're standing outside these clinics to, you know, better inform women, and then it's up to them if they go in there or not. Well, actually, you don't want to give them that choice, so why don't you just come out and say it? You're not freedom-loving until it becomes about your right to stand outside that clinic and then shout about freedom. But actually, you don't even like freedom. What about the freedom of the women to have those abortions in the first place, if they wanted to?
Thank you. Thank you. The gentleman in the middle in the orange jacket, and then we're going to take 2 at the front, and then I'm afraid that's it. Yeah.
Thank you. Just a very brief point on what was said earlier about picking up the pieces and post-abortion counselling. It seems to me like Greg and a few other people in here are in the business of actually moralising and making women feel as guilty as possible. So it's not surprising that some people do come to you and say, you know, I feel really bad about it. I know someone close to me who a few years ago, you know, regretted having an abortion, but was made to feel really, really guilty about it. So it's hardly surprising. That's how you want them to feel.
Okay, and finally, 2 in the very front row, and I'm afraid that's it from the questions.
I'd like to ask Anne this question. Background is that in 1953, me and my twin sister were born 6 weeks premature, And we spent 6 weeks in an incubator in very fragile condition, but we survived. I'm very glad to be alive. And I would like to ask you, are you glad to be alive? And the subsequent question is, how then can you possibly justify killing what we all once were?
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm afraid I'm really sorry, but that's it for the questions. We don't have time for any more questions. So we are now going to take Anne and Gregg to answer some of those questions, if you can, probably not all of them, and also to make your concluding remarks. You've got about 4 minutes each, which I know is not enough, so you don't have to tell me that. We'll start with Anne for the motion, summing up, please.
Okay, difficult to both answer the questions and speak to the motion. So I'm largely going to just come back on a couple of the questions, which is really that I think, the thing that I regard for us as a service, as a failing, is if a woman has an abortion, that she then goes on to regret. Because what you really want as a service that cares for individual women is to make sure that they are as fully informed as they can possibly be, to make the choice that's the absolute best choice for them, and that they can have the options that they really need, right? So that's actually what you really want to do. And I think that, you have to understand that this isn't about numbers. It's not about saying, can you maximize your number of abortions or reduce it? It's about doing the best thing for the women that you've got in front of you. Now, there are some people who will make decisions that they will go on to regret, and some of them may end up coming to you. There are women who will regret having had their abortion, just as there are some women who will regret having had children. There are some women, some women do regret having had children, just as some women will regret having had their abortions.
Please.
But the point that is absolutely crucial for me is that whether she stands by a decision or whether she regrets a decision, that it will have been her decision to make, which she can take responsibility for because she made it, because life isn't easy. And we don't always make decisions that we want to make. We don't always have the choices that we would wish to have. I completely agree with the point that was raised, that there should be far better facilities to help women have the children that they want, to provide the mental and support and social support for women when they've had unwanted pregnancies. So women might not always make the choices that they want, but it will be their choice. And if what you're saying to me is that you think that women should be able to make the choice that they feel is right for them, fully informed with the information that they need, then maybe that's one thing that we can agree on at the end of this. But what I'm saying to you is that when I was addressing that motion, I was saying that what I thought was morally wrong for you to be doing is standing outside clinics, interfering with women's ability to access that choice that they wish to make. For me, this is all about women making the decision for themselves and respecting that. And I ask you to respect them.
Last night, someone called to my attention a live newscast in which Ms. Furedi appeared, and she was asked multiple times whether she supported or opposed gender-side, sex selection abortions, and her answer, in essence, was that if a woman is unable to cope with a girl because she wanted a boy, then we should trust her doctor in good conscience to recognize that there's a potential mental health risk here and grant her for her abortion. This whole mental health idea is a canard that completely eviscerates any attempt to regulate abortion. Abortion regulations are a total fraud when all anybody wants who wants an abortion is simply say, I'm depressed by having a boy or a girl or a baby with Down syndrome or whatever. All of this depresses me, or it's just not the right time, I'm depressed, and the baby ends up being killed. These doctors to whom Ms. Furedi refers were described in recent news coverage in the UK as pre-signing consent forms, pre-signing authorization forms for abortions, unlawfully doing that, making a further mockery out of the idea that these doctors are acting in good faith. It's a fraud. In fact, a former medical director at BPAS admitted that they routinely pre-signed these forms. These are the doctors Ms. Furedi says we can trust to counsel these women inside the clinic. These doctors are going to show these women everything they need to know. That's medical malpractice. Now, the lady who said that she heard us accusing women of being murderers, that's defamation. I've never said that, ever. I've never called a woman a murderer for an abortion. I've never heard a pro-lifer call a woman a murderer for an abortion. But I am calling doctors who pre-sign these authorization forms guilty of malpractice. I'm saying that, and if they want to sue me, I would welcome the opportunity to engage them in a court of law. Let me just finish by saying the power of these pictures is that the pictures force everyone to stop pretending. They force everyone to stop pretending that this baby really isn't a baby and abortion really isn't an act of violence. And Ms. Furedi again and again, and Ms. Furedi, I say this quite respectfully, tells the lie, and it is a lie, that we are interfering with these women's access to care. BPAS doesn't care for women, it kills babies, but more to the point, interfering with any patient's access to health care is criminal misconduct. If that's true, call the police. If she hasn't called the police, why hasn't she called the police? We would again welcome an opportunity to make our case to the police and the Crown Prosecutor that nothing we're doing involves interference with abortion. And I should say, the Crown had an opportunity to charge our people with interference and chose to not do that because, in fact, we aren't doing that. Ms. Furedi comes back again, and I'll close on this point, to the question of whether we believe a woman should have the right to choose. Again, wildly off topic, trying to change the subject from informed consent to abortion. The issue tonight isn't whether women should have the right to choose. The issue is whether that choice should be an informed choice, not as Ms. Furedi defines informed, but as women who decide to look at our pictures when they don't have to decide it, and then come back to us and say, thank God you were here, my baby's now alive.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I would like to thank both our speakers, Gregg and Ann, for giving us a highly polarized, morally divided, but civilized and enlightening debate. And thank you for your questions. We are now going to end by taking another vote to see if there have been any shifts, any changes of view from when we had the opening vote. So, at the start, before the debate, the numbers were 15 for the motion, 81 against, and 24 undecided. And at the end of the debate, it's 23 for the motion, 117 against, and 14 undecided. So congratulations to Gregg, who won, but also congratulations to Ann, who upped the numbers a little bit there. Thank you all for coming, and I'm sure this debate will continue online, in other forums. Thank you.